Well, welcome back to the HSBC podcast, everyone. I am your host, Dave Mormon, and it's not every single week that you get to sit down with someone named Mike Andes. You know, I've had my eye on Mike for a while now and watching him scale up Augusta Lawn Care services, and he is a super down-to-earth, humble guy who is extremely switched on when it comes to life and business. And I think you're going to learn a lot of valuable lessons in my discussion here with Mike. He's now scaled up to over 180 franchisees in Augusta, which is so exciting to see. And he's also just very young and very hungry and getting after it in business. And so I think you're going to get inspired from hearing Mike's story, because we start all the way where it started before he got to really growing what he's grown today. So Mike is a kind of case study in staying patient and doing one thing really well, and also just seeing how far you could push a home service business, as Mike has demonstrated with Augusta. So join me for a front row seat. I think you're going to really love this one as I have a chat with Mike Andes.
All right, everyone, it's Dave Mormon here. I'm with Mike Andes here on the HSBC podcast show. Mike, how are we doing today, brother?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man. I was just sharing with you before we jumped in. I started my podcast, everyone, about 4 years ago, and I made an original list of 10 guests that I want to bring on, and Mike was on that list. So fast forward 4 years later, and Mike's on the show. So it's a big deal for us here, man. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Congrats to all your success.
Yeah, man. Well, let's I come from the exterior cleaning world, Mike, and you're in the landscape world. We're going to send everyone to your YouTube channel because I love what the stuff you're doing there. I want to hear a bit about, man, how I like to start is hearing people's backgrounds into how you got started in entrepreneurship. So I'll just give you the mic and I want to hear some context.
Yeah, so I started mowing grass when I was 11 years old. My brother and I just pushed our lawnmower around our neighborhood. Got about 30 lawns that we did that first year. I think we made like all of maybe $3,000 in that first season. And we did that because we knew we were going to go to college early. And so I had kind of sped through primary school. I was doing a couple grades in one, did some homeschooling just so I could get through school as fast as possible. I started college when I was 13 years old, and my goal was to become a medical doctor. So, and more specifically, a surgeon. And so I was like, look, I'm going to start this thing early, get out of this as fast as possible. Turns out when I was 18, after my undergrad, before going to medical school, ended up dropping out after going overseas and really enjoying the medical field, but then coming back to the US and just being like, I don't want to be doing the same procedure for the next 40 years of my career. I also not really a fan of where we were going with insurance and kind of the bureaucracy and the paperwork side of things. And so from there, I was like, okay, well, the only thing I know really how to do is mow grass. So that's when I started Augusta Lawn Care, and the rest is history.
Man, that's amazing. How did you think? A lot of stands out there, man. I was curious on your story. Like, how did you get going in college when you were 13, man? Like, what? I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, my brother's 2 years older than me. And so he started kindergarten when he was 5. I was 3. Well, I had nothing better to do because the only thing I want to do is play with my brother. So I just sat there and learned everything. And then when we went to an actual school I went a year early for kindergarten, and I'm still short, but like back then I was really, really short. So my mom's like, you're not going to continue going forward 2 years ahead. So she kept me back a year. So I actually did kindergarten like literally 3 times. When I was 3, 4, and then 5. And then, and so it kind of set me up for just feeling ahead of my class, being, teaching them throughout primary school. And I skipped a couple grades, did a couple grades in one, a couple times. And then, went early to college.
Just a little bit early, hey? 5 years earlier then. That's so cool, man. It's really cool, man. I was always curious about kind of that part of your story. Tell us, man, give us some scale of the business, because this is no small business by any means.
Yeah, so right now with Augusta, we have 187 locations or so right now. Last year, we did about 54 million in revenue across the whole system. Wow. And obviously that's the franchisees and their ownership that really pushes that. And then the Copilot CRM is the second branch of the business. And they process right around 250 million in revenue through that in terms of the owners, like the business owners running revenue through, and that's doubling or tripling each year. So it's a lot of growth there because the companies that join Copat usually grow, and also there's new companies coming in. Obviously, we don't. That's not our revenue. That is just the revenue coming through the system. And then the third kind of leg of the business is the media side. So everything we're doing with YouTube and the books and conferences and courses and stuff like that. So that's kind of the three pillars of the business as it stands.
Okay. Okay. Amazing, man. I'll tell you a little story. Literally 2 days ago. So I'm in Canada, but we live in kind of South Surrey area, so we can cross the line to Bellingham really quick. So we're getting a little procedure done on our little guy's ears, and we're driving on man, what's the main highway? Was it
176?
Meridian? Yeah,
Oh,
Meridian,
Guide
I
Meridian.
think.
Oh, Guide Meridian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're coming through, and what do you know? An Augusta landscape truck is driving by. I'm like, tell my wife, I'm like, I'm gonna chat to Mike this week, and we keep going a little bit. Then we see your billboard, man, and it's a billboard, and I don't know if that was like a full location, but there was a few trucks parked there. I'm like, dude, there's another sign of Mike. And my wife, she's like, I just love their logo, like with the dog, like it looks so. I'm like, yeah, my wife would be your ideal avatar. So it's just like so cool, man. Just we're just crossing the line and seeing like Augusta just like dominating in Bellingham. So just kind of made me smile. I thought you'd like to hear that.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, there's a couple locations actually not too far, like East Surrey. My sister lives up there, so she runs into
Okay.
team members out mowing all the time. But yeah, it's a great market, and yeah, we're very close. So
Yeah, no, man, that's great. Well, my first question, man, is one about kind of risk and scale. And obviously everything you got going on, anyone who listens to your show, like Caesar doing real estate stuff as well. When you got, I think you said 187 franchisees, you're in Canada, US, and are you in Australia now too? I saw, right?
yep.
So they're all over the world. How do you go about like justifying the risk to make this happen by way of like vehicle accidents, injuries, employee issues? Like I kind of want to hear, I love asking an enterprising entrepreneur like yourself, how do you go about like rationalizing that in your head?
Yeah, like I think whenever you add scale or size to anything, it just increases the magnitude of liability. So if I want to build a bridge across a river, if I just need to do a walking bridge, the amount of foundation that is required, the amount of concrete, rebar, reinforcement, and risk is much lower. Whereas if I'm going to, hey, I want a train to go across this bridge, I need to build it differently. Also, the amount of risk is much higher. So because the risk is higher, the planning is greater, the resources to build the bridge are much greater. And so whenever you're trying to build a business, the function is like, in order to scale this quote unquote river, what's the size of business that needs to be built? And so with a larger business, there's going to come more liability. As soon as you have employees, there's more liability. You have more trucks and equipment. You had locations. You had different geographies and different legal parameters. Things like franchising has more and more liability. And I don't think it's this is a big reason why I don't think everyone should just keep growing their business. It's just like, how big of a business do I need to build in order to reach the achievement? Because I don't need to build the next Golden Gate Bridge if I'm just trying to scale a 400-foot river or 300-foot river. Like it's different a scope and of liability that's required. And so for anyone that is like listening to myself or people, it's like, look, you might not need this size of bridge, right? And so like working backwards from what is the goal you're trying to achieve, and if that's just, hey, I just want to make $100,000 a year, be able to take 3 or 4 months off a year with my family, have a vacation with them, you don't need this liability and you probably don't want it. And so I would just, caution anyone to ever think that the sheer size of the bridge is important. Because guess what? If I have a 30-foot creek I'm trying to get across and I build the Golden Gate Bridge, no one cares.
Mhm.
It's like, why did you waste all that time? This is why people build these massive businesses and they have regrets in terms of what they could have done in their past, because they didn't need to build that size of business to achieve what they really wanted. And so I'd work
Right.
backwards from the goal in terms of what
Okay.
size and scale of liability is required.
So have you done the thinking and the pathway planning of where this thing your building's going in 5, 10 years, or are you just kind of like, we're going 1 year at a time and like we're just ripping?
Yeah, like we do want to take the company public. I do think that the next foray for any labor industry is going to be robotics, and so we're really just building the groundwork for that. And then when we go public, be able to tap into public markets to be able to fund the expansion into the robotic side of things. And I think that having the distribution of all the locations, as well as the backend infrastructure with a command center to be able to operate and diagnose and troubleshoot the robots, is going to be a big lever in terms of being able to scale it. Because the technology is actually already there. The legislation's behind a little bit in terms of robotics. But I believe that the barrier as to why this technology doesn't really take over is because there's no one that's going to buy thousands of these from day one when it comes to residential. And so our goal is like to build that infrastructure, that distribution network. So as the technology gets better and the cost comes down, that we'll be able to eventually tap into it. But I still think I still believe it's 5 to 15 years away from really making a big impact in the industry.
Cool. So you could build this like huge infrastructure. You could have 1,000 franchisees, and then at some point you're licensing to all your franchisees. Hey, like you're talking robotics, like, hey, the grass is now going to get cut with an actual robot. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like if you look at any fragmented market, most of the time what happens is technology comes along and consolidates it. So if you look like the cab industry, you go back even 15 years ago, no one owned more than 1% of the market. Whereas now, 75% of the market's owned by Uber and Lyft when it comes to cabs. And so I think of the same thing when it comes to home services. And that is right now, for example, in the US, there's 600,000 landscapers. And when it comes to the residential market, no one owns more than 1% of that market. And so I do believe that technology will come along and consolidate that. And I do believe it'll be robotics, because the biggest cost of goods sold, or the biggest cost to all of us as home service business owners, and the lever about which our entire business model is built on, is labor. And so if you can take labor that is used to be, say, $25, $30, $35 an hour, once you take into account taxes, et cetera, and make that $5 or $10 an hour using robotics, now there's big disruption, because now I can make margin on a $15, $20 lawn mowing, and everyone else has to be charging 40. And so that's where I think the disruption will take place. Again, people have been talking about robotics for 15 years in lawn care and a lot of other home service industries, and we're still a ways away from it. But I do believe it will get here. And to think not is usually the same. The yellow cab companies are like, yeah, no, we're going to stay here and just use legislation to block all this. The technology will win.
Yeah, man, I agree. It's funny now. I find in my day to day, almost daily, I have this brainwave of like, I'm doing a task that I'm like, I think in a year, 2 years, 3 years, like Dave actually won't be doing this task. I take my son and our little doggo for not little, she's a big golden retriever. We go for a walk every day. I literally had in my mind, Mike, a neighbor was waving at us. I'm waving back. I'm like, I think in 3 years, that's going to be like a robot of some kind. What's up, guys? It's just like so crazy to think the future we're blessed to get to live in. I think is just, if you're entrepreneurial living today, it's hard to fall asleep at night, because I'm just like, there's all these different things that's going on. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think the risk is that because it's so easy to feel left behind when things are moving so quickly. And then what I like to think of as like in the micro, sometimes it seems like things are going so fast. Like it's funny because for business owners, a lot of times when you look at your last 6 months, you're like, man, like there's just, I feel like I'm not getting fast enough. Like, where's the improvement for my business? And like, I don't feel like I'm going fast enough. But then if you go back, say, 10 years, and see like, oh man, like I was a completely different person. Like I was like, I had a different line of business. I was a different industry. I didn't have podcasts. Like there's gonna be so much rate of change. And sometimes what can be difficult is we as entrepreneurs feel like, because like AI is moving so quickly, it's like I've got to like add services and I got to change my whole business model. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like in essence, you probably have a few years before this is going to completely change the industry. Probably 5 to 10 years before robotics start to come along. But the people who will win at the robotics game are the ones that are currently like trying to figure out how AI can be implemented inside of their admin process or their sales process. And so it's more a matter of like being curious. And that's the part of, if you lack curiosity around new technology, they're the people who get wiped out. And being the new and the first and the best, not necessarily the best, because usually you buy into something when it's $60,000 and then in a few years later it's $5,000. If you're like an entry level, like always, first mover, first shaker, usually you lose money. That's where venture capital and private equity lose tons of money. But when it comes to actually operator, it's about being curious about this technology and how can I use it in my business to make it more efficient. And the number one step to actually being able to know whether or not it's making an impact in business is knowing your numbers. It's like, I think most people don't know their numbers. And so to think that you're going to use new technology and be able to quantify as to whether or not it's moving the needle is ludicrous. So I'd encourage most people, when they hear all AI and all the changes coming in, private private equity is moving in. It's like, well, let's slow down, like look at the basics of your business. Like, do you even know as to whether or not this new technology will move the needle for your business? And can you measure that based on your close ratio, based on your time to lead? Do you actually have these KPIs in place to be able to know?
Yeah, so well said.
Have you ever thought about all the different hats you need to wear as a business owner? Like, seriously, you need to learn marketing and sales and hiring and operation and finances and HR and everything to stay organized in the field and customer service and the office and VAs. The list goes on and on. Well, what I've done after scaling my very own pressure washing business to doing over 5,000 jobs and hiring 54 team members, I was able to organize the whole business all around creating simple systems for my business. I've taken all those systems, I put them on a silver platter for you inside our HSBC Accelerator coaching program. Not only do you get these templated systems, you also get coaching and the community of ambitious home service business owners that are scaling. We've already had 60 companies join us. Go ahead and check out what the Accelerator is all about. And I want to see you on the inside.
Man, you have what I call the coaching gene, in that you can make complexity simple. And I want to give you the mic here, man, because you got a lot of listeners in a similar niche to yours, a lot of exterior cleaners, pressure washers, painters. What I want to talk about inhibitors to scale. And by scale, a lot of the guys just listening doing, let's say 200-300 grand is not uncommon. And a lot of kind of, you talk to these guys with your franchisees. What's like 2 or 3 big roadblocks these owners face to scaling? And then I'd love for each roadblock to hear maybe some coaching around like, hey, we should look at kind of this as a bit of an unlock. I'm just curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, so I kind of look at 4 different stages of a business, depending on your scale, and we kind of use this at Augusta in terms of the models that a location can be profitable in. The first is a solo operator. You in a truck, you doing all the work yourself, and that can actually be really profitable if you stay at that size and increase the amount your hourly rate. You can bring in $150,000-$200,000 if you just, as you hit capacity, raise prices, hit capacity, raise prices, and stay as a solo operator. Now, the second stage is when you start getting a few employees. I call this the working GM model. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have a GM. This means that the person managing the business is also producing labor revenue out in the field. And so this is what I call the working GM. Now, the reason I call it the working GM is because it could be the owner being the GM. You could scale this and have a GM with 3 to 4 employees out in the field doing work and make this profitable. So that's the working GM model. From a revenue perspective, 500, 800,000 annual revenue, somewhere in there. You're looking at 3, 4, 5 maybe employees. Now, the challenging part here, and this is, if you start at the beginning phase, when you go from solo operator to getting your first couple employees, the challenging part is now you have less of your time being spent producing revenue and more of it being overhead. And so you have a margin collapse. And so a lot of times you have this wilderness of profitability between usually 200,000 and 500,000 in annual revenue. And it's caused not because you're doing anything wrong, not because your pricing is messed up, but simply due to the fact that less, like your best employee, you, as the owner, that produced so much revenue, is super efficient, is now straight overhead and driving around a truck all day long doing estimates, doing follow-up phone calls, doing emails, etc., like lower leverage tasks. And so there's this gap where you can't really afford a full-time office and admin person, but you kind of are juggling both. And so then we move into what I call the full-time manager. Full-time GM. That's the third phase of a business. This is now where you have a full-time admin person, and then you are fully managing the business. You are no longer in operations, right? So I kind of look at, there's 3 functions of business: sales, operations, and admin. And this is the first stage where now you are completely out of operations. This is what most people consider like working on, in the business, operations. But I think there's 3 major functions: sales, getting the work; operations, doing the work; and then admin, which is like greasing all the gears so the work can get done: payroll, email, phone calls, etc. Now, as we go from the third phase, which is the full-time GM, and we move into the GM plus model, which now is, I actually need to have department heads of sales, so a sales manager, an operations manager, and an office manager or admin manager. Now I can scale this business usually $1.5 to $3 million at that 4th size of business. And so the reason I like to have those 4 distinctions is because the role of the owner changes at each of those. And whether or not you delegate sales or you delegate operations, or you delegate admin, really comes down to like, what is the value of that task that you are delegating to the business? And assuming that you're charging $100 an hour, technically speaking, everything that is less than $100 per hour task value should be delegated. And usually the first thing we hand off is admin. And then as time goes on, usually it's like, okay, I got to get out of the business. I'm going to get an operations manager. And then eventually, as really business really is, because you get 1.5, 2, $3 million. Okay, now I'm going to get a sales manager. And now we have that GM plus model. And so recognizing where you're at in that stage is important, not only to know what to focus on, and what your main role should be, but also realizing that there are inherent pains associated with each of those stages, and to keep your head in the game, especially if you're trying to scale and trying to get to the next level, that your role will change. Like your role at the beginning, working harder, working 10, 12 hours a day out in the field, needs to change and be different and evolve when you have $1 million in revenue and you're trying to find your next operations manager. And so people always ask, what's the biggest mistake small business owners make? And it's like focusing on the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so the person that is trying to focus on, I'm trying to like figure out the vision of my business and the scale for my management team. Is like, look, you're doing 100,000 in annual revenue. You need to focus on how to be more efficient out in the field so you can produce a 200,000 in revenue and be more profitable. And so I think focusing on what should your role as the owner be, and where do you get your highest leverage for the time that you have in the business?
So true, man. Like, I feel like for a guy like you, it's almost, correct me if I'm wrong, like almost easy to delegate. Like, your franchisees, I'm imagining it's a standard bell curve. Like, why do some really struggle, man, to get out of the office and off the tools? Like, what is it that allowed you to look at delegating and moving up this chain of command, and others that get stuck? Is it like you're just not coachable? Is it you're a perfectionist? Like, what have you seen that is like the concrete blocks holding someone down from that?
Yeah, like I'm certainly no different than anyone else that's facing the same difficulties delegating, and a lot of it is, you fear. First and foremost, having more money helps, because when you have more money, there's less risk associated. But for the vast majority of us, when we're growing our business, we're cash strapped, and so one mistake can put us completely under. And so, what happens if I delegate admin? All of a sudden, the phone calls don't get answered. What if I delegate admin and all of a sudden the emails don't get answered? What if my invoices don't get sent out? What if all of a sudden my accounts receivable goes through the roof if I delegate invoicing? And so the fear of one ball dropping in the juggling act of being a business owner is the fear about which we then just hold on to everything. And so you're just the master juggler, and you never actually delegate and actually let one of the balls drop and then give it to someone else. And that is a fear, and it's a valid fear. I don't think it's necessarily to say like, oh, like you just grow up and learn and be better. Like it's a function of like, that is a common issue, and it is a feature of entrepreneurship and not a bug if you don't have cash. Now, this is why like venture capital will step in and give companies millions of dollars. Why? Because they know if you have millions of dollars, you will delegate faster because there's less risk associated with failure. And so the fear that you're feeling in delegation is not fear of delegation, because you don't want to be answering the phone. You don't want to be answering the email. You're actually afraid of failure. You're afraid of the business actually going under because someone else makes a mistake. And just to be clear, that can happen. So then the question becomes like, how do I prevent that from happening? Well, creating a system in place so that when you delegate, it is easier for that person to be successful is probably a good idea. And so I always like to think of, before I delegate something, I'm going to make a system for it. Well, how do I create a system? Well, it's simple. I'm trying to avoid complexity, and I'm trying to avoid custom things. The opposite of complex and custom is simple and standardized. So I'm creating a simple, standardized way to answer emails, a simple, standardized way to answer the phone, a simple, standardized way to sell a job. Then I can delegate it much easier because there's a system in place for that sale, that phone call, that email to be answered. And so I think the vast majority of us would be served well to simplify and standardize every process in the business, so that if and when we need to delegate that, we actually can.
Totally, totally. And do you feel like the owners, the franchisees just don't make the time to actually build out those systems, so they get stuck in this hamster wheel? Or what do you feel like we're going like levels of the onion here? This is good. Like, why do they not end up making the system in the first place? Is they just generally end up operating the system?
It's just really fear, because like the reason I say it is because even inside of Augusta, where we make the systems and we tell you this is exactly what you should do, and like I have seen this 200 times and I know this works, even still, some people will have a difficult time adopting the system. And the function for that is, again, fear. Like fear is the thing that locks you up from your true potential, because we know what we should do. We know logically if we're making $100 per hour in the field, there's no reason in the world we should not hire someone for $25 an hour to answer the phone, do email, and run payroll. It makes no mathematical sense. But right now, the cost, the downside of having an employee is $25, $30 an hour. The downside of not having them is just you working longer. And there's this like buffer of how much you can just push into the gray zone of taking more and more on your plate. And that's the danger zone that eventually leads to burnout and total collapse, like existential risk to the business. And so, but I really sympathize with people, and I'm not of the opinion, like I don't go hard against people that aren't delegating, because I know it's like to have financial constraints that cause you to do things that are illogical. Like it is just not logical to not delegate someone that is doing a valued task that is a quarter of what you're doing. And by the way, if you have employees, you're not $100 an hour like labor rate. If you're managing people that are doing $100 an hour, your actual value per hour is probably $150 to $200 an hour as a manager of people that do $100 hour tasks. And so why in the world are you checking your email? That makes no logical sense. However, in that moment, you will say, well, I'll just do it on the weekend. I'll just do it in the evenings. Like it just takes me a few minutes. And so that, death by 1,000 cuts is what happens to most small business owners.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, man, this is awesome, by the way. I'm curious, in your franchisees, you've been doing this a while. Is there a specific trait that you see in the successful ones of like, this kind of trait about them, or they focus on this one thing? Those tend to be like my top 20% stars that ascend. That's first question. And second one, I'm curious, is it a standard bell curve of like your top 20% and the rest, or how does that spread of performance go across your portfolio of franchisees?
Yeah, like the standard bell curve, the 80/20 rules is inherent in almost every system. Like if you look at like revenue growth, like how fast someone grows, for example, in Augusta or in most businesses, it is the 80/20 rule. And what's funny instead of Augusta, everyone has the same set of rules and systems. And so you can really tell like the adoption of the system is the thing that leads to being on one side of this bell curve and vice versa. In this day and era, whether you're in a franchise or not, there's so much to be learned in terms of systems, procedures, and what works. Ultimately, hubris and pride is the reason why we all as business owners think that we should just create our own way, when it is insane. Like I'd give you 20 years ago, you kind of got to forge your way through things. But like now, like with the internet, YouTube, AI, etc., there's just no reason, as long as you're humble, to not be able to learn from many people that have tread this way before. And so whether you're inside of a franchise and you can look at other owners and talk to other people who have literally done this, or you can go on YouTube, if you're not inside of a franchise or a community, you can do the exact same thing and like learn from the people who have done this before. And it is ultimately pride that gets in the way of many of us learning. And the day you stop becoming a student is the day you will plateau in the business. And it is a huge gold mine and opportunity to listen to podcasts and YouTube videos. Like it just boggles my mind, because the only reason that people don't listen to someone who's done this many times in the past and then just apply the exact same logic they're telling you is pride. It's like, oh, it's different in my market, or like I'm somehow different, or like my business is different. Like that will kill you. And I think that we also prescribe this notion that we are somehow weaker or less than if we listen to other people that are ahead of us and apply their logic, and we somehow can't talk about it. I'm pretty open to the fact that like I only follow two people on Instagram. It's Alex Hormozy and my coach, Dr. Kashi. Like they're the only people that are going to influence me, and I'm going to go very deep on their logic and like how they think about business. And I'm going to apply everything that they talk about to my business, and I'm going to do it. And if I talk to them personally and they tell me something, I'm going to do it blindly, because I trust the fact that I am not smart enough to know what they have gone through and all the reps they have already put in. And it's like, yes, you can figure things out in yourself. It'll take you twice as long. You will make twice as many mistakes. And by the time you catch up, someone else that has just applied the system, here's the things that I did in my business, and they just applied them, will already be the next step in stage of their career, figuring out leadership, figuring out their next location, whatever it might be. And so the ability to humble yourself and learn is actually the unlock in business, because there are people like We're talking about home services. This has been around for a long time. There are plenty of people to learn from, and there are plenty of people who have done this before. And so your inability to listen to someone else is your inability to humble yourself and actually just apply what's already working.
Yeah, totally, man. I feel like there's so much information now. It's almost an excuse for a lot of these people, franchisee or not, to just like disregard the implementation of what they've learned, because they'll just jump from Hermosi to Dan Martel to Mike Gandy's and rinse and you run this and then nothing gets done. And I think that's a problem in itself too, that it excuses the implementation because we'll just eat at the buffet of getting more info. And that's a problem.
Mental masturbation. That is what that is.
Exactly, man. That's a Hermosi. Yeah, you're doing good with that. I heard you on Tommy's podcast, man. Tommy Mello's really good chat. About early in, you mentioned with your franchisees, you used to give them templates and like systems for how to run their Google PPC or how to structure a Facebook ad. And I think you mentioned recently you're like, we're looking at just running everything for these guys. It's funny, in our coaching role, we white labeled all these systems, everything. And we've been looking at that too and piloting. Let's just let us build out your playbooks, because like you guys are so busy out there. Like, let's just let our team do it. So where are you at in your structure with decision making on letting franchisees do it versus like, let's just take this and let our franchisor side do it?
Yeah, we have a little bit different method on that. Like if I was trying to maximize how much revenue we were making, we would have done this from day one, because we have a set monthly fee. But I know that the vast majority of owners will spend significantly more than that on marketing than what they pay in franchise fees. And so that's where the money's at. But I also know that I cannot, with good conscience, take a percentage of management fee from them if I don't think they could just do it on their own, have a little bit less of a impact, and get similar results. And so what we've kind of adopted is we give them the exact step-by-step in a video of like, here's how you set up your ad, and here's like all the hyperlinks, and here's exactly the text you use, and here's the video, and here's the pictures, and like exactly here's how you're going to set up. And if I was to do it for you, this is exactly what I would do. So we've really gone the strategy of like just done for you in the fact that like follow this step by step. And let's assume that you are maybe 10% less good at this than an agency that is going to monitor it. That's usually where the end tail of distribution of results come from, is like monitoring of the ad. So if we can optimize this and change it, that's where a lot of the owners don't have the time for it. But I can usually get them to about 85 to 90%, cost per click, customer acquisition cost as an agency. And then it just becomes a matter of like, eventually it would make sense for them to go get an agency. If they're spending so much or have multiple locations, it starts to make a little more sense to actually go pay an agency to do it, because they do get that last 10 to 15% squeeze. But we can get them pretty close. And our hope is that down the road, I can make sense of being able to offer that in-house. But until like there's a very, very clear value discrepancy. And to me, I like, as an owner of my locations, the only way I'd really like that to roll out is a per lead basis. It's like per lead that we bring into you. That way you can budget it. And when you start a new location, you say, okay, X amount is going to be my budget. I will get X amount of leads. I will close 55% of those. And here will be my recurring revenue. Like that's what I want to build. But until we can nail that, we have not done that yet. And we're focusing on like the first version, which is taking our current leads that come in that are unserviceable and just trying to sell those to other vendors and other partners instead of competitors, and just giving that money to the owners.
Yeah, man. I'm thinking if this was like a business in a box, you packaged all the ops systems, long term, you built in the robotics, and then you figured out a way that they would be paying per lead and maybe even like per book job or something. I'm like, that would be like a no-brainer. Like I think the future of these businesses, man, have this like intelligent owner that's overseeing their robotic team in the field, their AI agents, and like, I don't know if they're like, depending on where they take this business to, I think you could have a more simple built out model with less human beings running it. That like, do you look at awarding people multiple territories right now, or are they single territory owners?
Yeah, more and more becoming multi-unit operators. But like I kind of look at the future as what'll kind of happen is it'll just simply shift from a variable cost structure to a fixed cost structure. So for example, I'll take my gym. I have an Anytime Fitness location, for example. The cost to build out an Anytime Fitness now is between 800,000 and $1 million, depending on your market. Just to build it out, do the whole equipment, lease improvements, etc. But once you've built it, you just pay your rent. And as long as you get over that fixed cost, everything on top of that's like 80-90% margin. Like if I added 100 more members tomorrow, my cost would not go up. Like literally the cost, like maybe a little more water. Um, and I see that as where home service goes. And when you do that is when you have consolidation. And so what happens like right now is you don't have to spend very much up front to start a lawn care business, maybe $15,000-$20,000, or a cleaning business, a couple $1,000s to get started. And then you pay variable 40-50% cost of goods sold in terms of direct labor on every single job. What changes in the future is who can buy the most robots, because now the jobs, once I get X amount of jobs, I pay off the robot. I don't have variable costs. The cost is all in the fixed buy up front. And so I think what looks interesting down the road is, okay, now does a lawn care business start with $500,000? They go buy 15 robots. And now it's two people operating a business that has 15 robots and can do the work of what used to be, let's just call it 5-10 employees. And so I think that is where it will shift with robotics. But I genuinely believe we're talking 15 years down the road before this becomes a real thing. And so I think more now it's a function of like, are you open to technology? Are you open to knowing your numbers to be able to actually make sense of when do I swap from variable costs to fixed expenses and go make a big capital purchase like a robot that would cost me $50,000, but do I actually know when that will get paid off? And so I think that as time goes on, that's where we'll move.
It's crazy too, though, man. Like 50 grand for a robot. Like, what would a field technician cost for a landscaping company? It'd probably be 40-50K anyways if they're staying for most of the year. So you could almost make the case like that's a great trade initially off the bat. It might be cool too to, I don't know, like I'm sure you're looking at this, but how does franchisor buy the robot fleet and then like lease them out to these guys on like, actually want to hear a little more of that. And then I got a couple questions to finish up. Your franchise is set up different and I think not percentage based. And I want to dive on this a bit, man, because I came from almost 10 years as a franchisee. And I'm going to be honest, Mike, I didn't have the best experience. In fact, I just posted on my personal Facebook, people are ripping me because it shows royalty fees. This was back in 2012, 41 grand. And a guy's like, oh my goodness, what did you get from that? And I'm like, I don't know really what I did get from that. So you're doing it different, man. I see you as a servant leader in our space. And I love what you're doing, but I want to hear, how is Augusta actually kind of like a different type of franchise?
Like ultimately, if you tear it back, it's because like I'm not in it to sell this thing. That's actually the real truth, because most people starting a franchise, like, let's get X amount of recurring revenue, bunch of people tied to 10-year contracts that they can't get out of unless they die, and then we'll go sell this to PE because you'll get a good return. And so we just basically looked at everything that makes a franchise valuable and actually just picked it apart and like, let's not do that. So for example, the reason that most franchises have such a great multiple when you go sell to private equity is the fact that your franchise agreement, literally, unless the person dies, is going to be paid. And in some cases, even if they die, you're going to still be paying a certain percentage in perpetuity, whoever the heirs are. So like it's extremely sticky. It's like one of the most sticky forms of revenue you can have, because of contracts. Like there's legal binding contracts. There are very few products in the world that you have a legal binding contract that unless you die, you will have to pay the vendor. And so that's why it's looked on so well from a private equity perspective. It's also why there's a lot of really bad actors that get into this game, because they know if they can get the 10-year contract, they got you. Even if you don't have the service, even if they don't do a good job of making sure you're successful or giving you new technology, et cetera, like they don't care because they got you in this 10-year contract. And so what we did is like, hey, look, what would be the best thing for the owner, and what would I want? So for example, I was a franchisee before I was a franchisor, so Anytime Fitness. So I knew the pain points. I'm like, okay, like I know that when I give money to this marketing fund, I can track how many people come in this door. And to this day, it's probably less than 10 people have ever walked in that gym. When I say here, the gym, it's like a few doors down. Less than 10 people have walked into that gym and said, oh, I saw you on TV, or I saw you on one of the national campaigns. Almost every single one comes from my local advertising that I do on Facebook, I do on Google. And so, or I do banners outside. So like, I just know that the return on my money is so much better for local marketing. So when we started the franchise, like, okay, we're not doing a marketing fund. There's no 4%, 3%, 2%, but we're going to take off every single dollar. Also, it doesn't make sense because why would I, as a franchisee, want to be paying into a marketing fund if I don't want to be growing? I just want to be increasing my prices and staying at my current size. So there's perverse incentives also for the franchisor if I'm getting a top line royalty, because now the first thing I'm going to do is tell you, go get a salesperson, dump tons of money into marketing, keep growing at all costs, because of course I'm incentivized to get more money. And so what we did is like, hey, look, you can leave at any time and take your customers. If you want to leave tomorrow, there's no penalty, there's no cost. You sign a document and you're out of the system, and you can take your customers. And it's a low barrier to entry business. You can literally just change the logos on your trucks, and you could be someone else. The initial fee we give back to them, assuming they stay with us for 5 years, they get that credited to the next location, or a check back to them in 10 years. Once the agreement's over, they just get the money back. And then also, when it comes to do's and don'ts of being in a franchise, it's like, look, almost everything we talk about is optional. You don't have to do it. I'm going to give you all the reasons as to why you should, and give you example after example after example. But like, I'm not going to regulate it a whole lot in terms of you must use this software. Like, we don't even regulate that you must use Copilot CRM.
Wow.
It's just a function of like, here's why we think this is the best, and here's why it will serve you well if you use that. You don't have to use our command center where we answer your phone. You can do it yourself, but it's a function of like, here's why this will work best for you. And then it's my job to ensure that whether it be the command center or the software, all the other things that we talk about, is actually going to lead to their success at the highest rate. And so, yeah, like, I think what makes it different ultimately is I don't care about selling this. My goal is to get to 1,000 locations so that we can have an impact on the industry. And I think we need to get to 1,000 locations to be able to have the reach in every single market, to where everyone's like, oh, we've got to implement pay for performance in order to compete with getting more talent. Okay, we're going to have to start answering our phone more often because they're answering their phone 24/7. Oh, we're going to have to upgrade our website. This is what raises the level of professionals in the industry, where most people don't answer their phone. Most people don't communicate with the customer, don't have automations, don't have software, there are so many levels that I think just putting pressure on the industry is what my objective is. So whether it be like the content, the free courses, or the franchise, like, I just want to see the industry improve.
Sweet. It's amazing, man. I didn't know it was so, I don't know what, like, non-binding, I guess is the word. Does that ever, like, do you see people dip in for 2 months, grab all your stuff and leave? I guess that's the first question. And two, like, or do you see franchisees just stay for 3, 4, 5+ years? What do you see?
Yeah, we actually have it where like someone can come for training and get all their money back if they don't want to start after that. We've only had one person ever do that. But yeah, like, if someone comes to training and before you leave, you're like, hey, I just don't think this is for me. Great, I'll give you your initial feedback and you're good to go. So yes, there's been one person that's ever taken me up on that. But I think the vast majority of people, they get in, they realize, okay, it's a flat monthly fee, and every single day I wake up, I'm trying to add value, and that fee doesn't change. Like, no one has ever had their monthly fee increase instead of Augusta. And so, and I don't plan on changing that. And so, but I can very confidently say the value has increased dramatically with the coaching program or preferred vendors and the discounts they get, or like all these other things. And so I think as long as we keep producing more and more value for the same price, I think we'll be okay.
It's amazing, man. So whether someone's doing $5,000 a month or $100,000 a month, they're just paying that set fee. So that automatically incentivizes to grow, because I want that fee to be as low percentage as possible. But at the end of the day, if the value's there for the monthly fee, or just like, it's a win for everyone. So this is almost sounding, man, it's like Jim's Mowing, like 2.0, it feels like. But it's like, personally, like, maybe Jim's listening, I don't know, but like, your brand rocks. You probably got more up and coming tech. You got the robotics, the investigation. You're a young, hungry leader. I think there's a lot of things in your favor to make this, because Jim's is like 1,000 locations, isn't it? Something like that.
They have several thousand actually. They have about 2,000 Jim's Mowing, and then they have another 2,000 of like 20 or 30 other services. And I think that the difference is that specifically in Australia, where they kind of focus on sole traders, as they call them there, like sole operators, is 95% of their franchisees. And so like, here we're trying to like, hey, if we actually tell them, like, if you just want to be a sole operator, don't join. Like, just watch my free content and you'll get what you need to be able to be very profitable.
Totally.
So it's just that's the only real difference.
It's funny, my buddy's franchising window cleaning in New Zealand and very similar. I'm like, man, all these franchisees have like just no employees. They're just the guy with the job. So it's a different mindset. Two last things, man, to finish up on. Let's go a little personal here, man. I saw you got married. Congratulations. I want to hear you on two fronts. Because I listened to your show, man, and I understand you were living in kind of this like almost storage closet, driving like a Honda Civic. So I want to hear take one on like delay gratifying, just hustling this thing up. And two, man, like buzzword in business. I don't have a better way to say it. Work life balance, has that changed for you? Or is it just like Dave, like saddle in for 100-hour work weeks if you want to truly build something magnificent? So I'd love to kind of hear you on the delayed piece, and then now on the on kind of the current setup, what it looks like from a balance perspective.
Yeah, like I think I really have no problem with someone that wants to work, 2 or 3 days a week or 4 hours a day and do it part time, assuming that the delta between where you're at and where you want to be at is small. And I think the only requirement I have for someone in terms of like, oh, like you should be, and I would use that term lightly, but like if someone has the audacity to say, okay, I'm at zero and I want to build $1 million business, let's just step back for a second and realize that you're saying that you want to do something that, first off, only 9% of people are self-employed. And own a business that has an employee, and then you're of that percentage, only about 10% are going to build $1 million business. So you're asking to be in the top 1 to 2% of business owners of humans. So because of that, you should require it is going to be required that where 99% of people gave up, you have to keep pushing through.
Mm.
And so what most people are not willing to do is why most people will not get to that level. And so if though right now you have a job or a business that is doing well and you're like, hey, I don't necessarily want to grow. I don't need to make more money. I'm happy here. Like I'm in profit mode and like I'll stay here. That doesn't require a whole lot of sacrifice
Mm.
because you don't have a huge gap between where you're at and where you want to be at. And so the same thing is true if you walk into a gym and you can lift 150 pounds, you're like, I want to get to 250. You better expect a huge amount of soreness, pain, reps, time, changing your diet to get from 150 pounds to 250 pounds. But if you're like, hey, I'm 150 pounds and I just want to get to 160, oh, okay, great. Like we can literally make this a weekend venture. And so it really comes down to the audacity and the size of the goals that you have. And if those are big, you should expect the sacrifice to be big. And if they are not big and you're just like, I do not need a lot in terms of economic things, great. You will not need to sacrifice very much. And so the thing is, many times Alex said this a few weeks ago, and I think it's so good, is like when there are people that talk about work-life balance and there are people that are billionaires that are now working very, very little. Many times on the up and up, they were working very differently. But let's just say now they say their statement is you should work less, you should do what you love, etc. Great. There are also people on the other side of the coin that work 100 hours a week and they say that's the only way to get there. And in most cases, wherever there is a variable that both sides of the coin can be argued and have any sort of opinion, usually means it doesn't matter. So
Mm.
how much you work and whether or not you have work-life balance actually doesn't have a huge contribution as to whether or not you're successful. It simply comes down to did you do certain activities, whether it be finding the right people, making the right offer, having the right product, having the right level of service, the right value discrepancy between what you charge and what you're worth. And so I do believe that work-life balance is a term that we all enjoy because it's all something we're all trying to figure out. But whether or not it is a variable of success can be debated because there are people that have worked 4 hours a week and still somehow become successful. Like Jesse Itzler, for crying out loud, like will spin up a business and like make something up and like put his name behind it and like all of a sudden it's $1 billion business and they're selling it. Like so
Yeah.
I think how you win is very it can be debated. The variables of that success and whether or not someone wins, that's what we gauge usually with dollars and cents.
Mhm.
But in terms of me personally, like, I just don't overthink it. I don't judge myself on it. Yeah, like prior to a year ago, 7 days a week and 14 to 18-hour days was very normal, and you can live in a closet. And we did that for 3 years because when we were growing the franchise, we were losing money for the first 3 years. Like at one point, like for every dollar we made, we lost $2. And it was because like from 0 to 100 locations, if you're actually going to support the franchisees, you need to build the infrastructure as if you have 100 locations, but you don't have the money coming in of 100
Right.
locations.
Wow.
And the way we kind of set up our royalty, like the payments and everything, they get a huge delay in fees for the first year and a half. And so it really put cash crunch. So I was like, okay, look, every single dollar needs to go back in business. So yeah, for 3 years, I stayed in the closet here, and then I just go around to the gym and shower there.
Mhm.
But different time of life. I'm not going to get married and do that to my wife.
Yeah.
And so now it's a function of like me. I did the math the other day. I'm like, okay, like me trying to save $200 on our food budget is literally a rounding error. Like if someone moves a decimal point on someone's paycheck, and like it's just the scale and scope of tens of millions of dollars in revenue and how many employees you have, it's like this actually doesn't matter. What I should be focused on is like optimizing for me spending more time creating and like recruiting the next team member. And so like the value of saving extra penny or two is less important or leveraged at this time.
Sure. No, man, that's great to hear. And I think the position you've got yourself in now, you have that luxury to make some of these decisions. But I think the key essence of your hustling up story was like, live on less, throw the time, the energy, the resources into the business. And I just love, man, how much you've documented along the way on your YouTube channel. Cause I'd like it's just so real, and it's very captivating to watch. It's not always talking head in a studio. Like you're actually like, you got some awesome I love the one, man, where you go and meet the customer to go you like fire them effectively. I'm just like, dude, we can all relate to that in our story, and I'm just like, it's super cool you caught that on camera for everybody to watch. So no, man, that's I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I know we got a lot of cleaners on here, but we've got landscapers too. And put Mike Andes into search, but where do you think would YouTube be the best place to send listeners if they listen to our whole chat, or where would be best to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I just wrote a book on the off season, but if you go to mikeandes.com/workshop, it's free. All
Okay.
the book material is free in video format. So I highly recommend it, whether you're a cleaning company, a lawn care company, any home service, applicable for everyone. And we talk a lot about exterior versus interior cleaning, and really fixing the Q4 is when we have a huge collapse in revenue. And so I just recommend it. I do believe it's the Achilles heel of the industry. It's also your biggest opportunity, because if you can figure out how to hire people, buy equipment, run ads during the off season, you will win this game very easily. And so I just recommend that. It'll be beneficial.
No, man, I appreciate it. We actually have guys in our program now running your P4P model, and I'm just like, yeah, we're getting guys buying your books, going through it. So it's just like your impact is not just in the grass cutting, man. It's coming in window cleaning, pressure washing, painting. So I think it's like pretty cool to see that impact you're having.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, brother. Well, we'll definitely we'll have to do this part 2 at some point, hopefully before the robots start coming in. But keep up the awesome work, man, and pleasure you carving out the time to jump on our show and drop some gold nuggets for our listeners.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Best of luck to you, brother.
You bet.
All right. Bye-bye.